So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Hopefully you've all had a great lunch and kicking back a little bit now. I'll try to keep it a little lively so you don't fall asleep after that great lunch. I know I had a good lunch with myself, so we'll try and keep it going and moving forward. My name is John Brock. I go by JB, and this is David Konechny. He's one of the lead engineers that's actually helped us put Project EASEL together over the last 6-7 months. So my intent today is really just to cover what Project EASEL is not first, and then tell you a little bit about what it is. I had those in reverse order, and as I started going through it a little bit more today, I thought, what the heck, we'll get the bad news out of the way first, then go to the good stuff. We'll talk about client-side projects, which is a new thing that we have in NetBeans 7.3 beta, which we're hoping to see released here anytime soon, next few days, a week. As soon as we can get it there, we'll get it there. We'll talk about HTML5, what we're doing with that in the new editor, what we're doing with the brand new JavaScript editor, which has a lot of great stuff in it, and some CSS3 capabilities. And then we'll end up with just kind of talking about some RESTful web services and how we can interact with those from the client side. So what Project Kenai is not. We're not a WYSIWYG editor. You're not going to come in here and start dragging HTML tables around and buttons and things like that. We're still down in the text side of things. We're not the Java solution. So for those of you that have been seeing this show up in the keynote last night or earlier this morning in David's talk or in a few other places, the question comes up, and it isn't as often as I thought it would, but it has come up, how does this compare to Java FX or JSF or something like that? It doesn't. This is just another tool to stick inside your belt, and when you come up against something that needs CSS formatting and layout and styling and so forth, or a better JavaScript debugging solution, we're going to have it there in the NetBeans IDE for you so that you can use what you need. I mean, if we waited for trends to materialize and mature, and then we started doing tooling, we'd be 6 months, a year behind every time. So we're throwing this together, and this is a V1 of it, and we're going to see where it goes. And it may mature and go in a lot of different directions. And many people have told us a few directions we could go. But we'll try and stay forward on it instead. We're not a web designer, so this isn't a competitor to Photoshop or things like that. You're not going to do a bunch of image manipulation and graphics work and stuff like that. But what we are. So it's a brand new client-side project called HTML5 application or HTML5 project. HTML5 is used as the buzzword to incorporate everything from real HTML5 to CSS3 and JavaScript all kind of mishmashed together. We have a brand new WebKit internal browser based off JavaFX WebView, and also external browser synchronization with a Chrome plugin that we've put in, and we'll do a lot of work with that and show a lot of that interaction. Code completion for HTML5 elements are now built into the editor, and I'll show that as well. New CSS styling and rules, and that's really where a lot of the work has gone into, and we'll show that. And then, of course, a brand new JavaScript editor that's all based on top of the new Nashorn technologies and things of that nature with smart code completion. So depending on where you are inside your JavaScript, we know what it is. We're going to give you the result or the suggestions that are a little bit more pertinent to where you are. That includes jQuery, which is now going to be built into the JavaScript editor. So as you start to type a jQuery command, if you hit Control Space to get code completion, it's going to show you jQuery information. And then the debugger. The debugger is actually pretty cool in that it's based off of remote WebKit debugging API, so we're pulling directly from the browser. We know exactly what's coming in. We're not trying to guess and process it ourselves. We're actually getting it right from the browser. So that's the extent of my slides. We're going to do live code from here on out. And we sacrificed an intern later today, so hopefully the demo gods will be with us. And we will see what happens. So this is just a nightly build coming off of the NetBeans 7.3 branch. And what we have is an HTML JavaScript. We now have an HTML5 application. And just going through this dialog, we'll throw up a new project. One of the things that we wanted to be able to do is in a lot of cases, we don't really know where to start in this new world of HTML5 and responsive design, which is a big word that's going around out there. But there are a lot of different templates that are out there available on the internet, from HTML5 boilerplate to initializer responsive, even Twitter Bootstrap. So what we did was we built in that you can grab one of these and we will pull it down live from the internet, from the most recent version off their site, and you can start scripting from there or building out your application based on those templates. Of course, if you're a cowboy and you're really daring, you can go without any template and we'll give you blank pages and away you go. For me, I'm going to use a template that I already created. And this is another thing that we've built in, is that if you create a project or your company's put something together, you can export it as a template. And so everybody else can then just pull it up and start from there. So if you've got a company standard or a group standard or something, you can set it up and away you go. Since we're dealing with JavaScript, we've built in a JavaScript library manager. This list is being pulled from Google CDN and CDN.js. There's literally thousands of libraries that are here. You can grab any one of them, add them to your project. You can grab all the different versions that are available. I'm just going to grab a backbone and add it to my list. This list over here shows all of the existing libraries that are already in my template. So I've got quite a bit of stuff built into this template. I'm just going to add that, and away we go. It downloads that backbone.js file, it unzips the demo, and it opens up my index.html into the editor. We've created a basic structure, if you will, when we put all of this stuff together, so that you can kind of mess around and feel for things being compartmentalized the way you keep JS files separate from your CSS and so forth. But looking at the project properties, we've got the project folder. We've got the concept of a site root. I mean, most of the time when you're FTPing or transferring your code up to some hosted service, they're sticking things under public HTML, so that's where we started. We go ahead and give you a base unit testing folder in case you want to get into your JavaScript unit testing. And David showed a little bit of that earlier this morning. So you can do all of that. Again, under JavaScript files, it's that JavaScript manager. You can add and mess with your files there if you need to. And then under the run side, this is where things are a little bit different in that we have the ability to set a default run target for the project. We have the embedded WebKit browser, which I'll show in just a second, and then we have the Chrome with NetBeans integration, as well as the other browsers that you can definitely run it in and check it out and see how it's going. It doesn't have the integration capabilities that we have with WebKit right now. We auto refresh on save. You can turn that on or off if you like, and then we have a lot of synchronization between the browser and the IDE itself, and I'll show that. The index file or the start file is basically, if I run this project using my big green button at the top, it's going to run that base file. You can set that to whatever you want. We default to index.html. We also provide a really lightweight embedded web server so that when we're dealing with our JavaScript and we're dealing with response headers and all this other stuff, we needed to run it from a web server instead of just running it off the file system. You can still run it off the file system if you want, but for right now, that's what we do. If you have something on your development machine like an Apache server that's running, say you've got Rails put in it, it's because you're running less or SES for CSS post-process or pre-processing or something like that, you can choose external and just provide us a URL to where that server is expecting those files to be or where they're going to serve up from. But it has to be on the local machine. We're not going to transfer files automatically some other remote location. So right now we're going to stay with that embedded one. So I have my project. It opened up my index.html. Let's take a look at some of the things that we've added into this. Coming down here a little ways, you'll see some different files that I've got. This is a typical editor that's kind of just like what you do in Java. If we highlight a class in this case, it highlights all the ones that are equivalent to it or the same, so you can mess around with those and see where things are at. If we click on a div, it shows the close and the open. But one of the things that's new in here is if I click on this div close down here, the top of that code fold is actually off my screen. But instead of having to scroll all the way up to figure out what it is, you'll notice there's a little tip that shows up at the top, tells me what that opening div is. really simplistic thing, but boy, it really helps when you're trying to get this long string of code. And I come all the way down here. What was my closing div? Well, my closing div is for my row fluid up at the very top. There's my span 9 and so forth. So I know kind of where I am just really quickly without scrolling so much in my code. It makes it pretty nice. The other thing when we talk about HTML5 is built in now into the editor is tag support for all these HTML5 tags. So say like article, or if I, let's see, yeah, article, you notice that we've got help that talks about what the element is, tells you how it gives you some samples of how it's used, things of that nature. So that's really where the HTML5 starts to come in. And I'm going to put in a footer element here. I'm just going to tab over on that. I'm going to add a class. And I'm going to call the class footer as well. And we'll see if we close that out. And this is another thing that it's been in there a while, but I think is pretty cool. If I wanted to make this a copyright notice, I have no idea how to memorize all the little ampersand things, but if I type ampersand and start to say, well, it's probably a copy, so I start typing, and code completion is going to pop up and give me with a little graphic there as well. And then, okay, that's what I want. And we'll make that 2012 and make it Oracle. So let's see what that actually looks like when we run this whole thing. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to give it a run. And it's going to pop up in a browser. Now bear with me for a second while I rearrange all of my screens here. The concept that we designed this off of is really dual browser scenario. So if you're working in the IDE on one browser or in one screen and monitor, and you've got another monitor running your browser, it actually works a little bit better. I'm also constrained down here to a 720 monitor, so we're gonna get a little crowded as we go here. In the browser, we brought all this up. We can see what's showing in the browser, and I can see down here at the very bottom, I can see my footer that I added in a minute ago. This whole application is actually built on top of Twitter Bootstrap, which is a responsive framework or styling template. And what it does is it allows me to adjust the size of my browser, and things adjust responsively. So as I start to narrow it down, I get things that are a little bit smaller, and then if I come down even more, then they drop down really tiny. So these are using a combination of CSS3's fluid grids and media queries, which if you've ever dealt with responsive design, it's actually a little complex in that you've got to figure out where is this image and what CSS media query is it in and all this other kind of stuff. So what we've done in the IDE is now I can actually move around in the IDE, and as I move over my navigator, it starts to highlight things in the browser so that I can just click on something and I can, as it comes up, again, things are a little crowded here. Where was I? Image. Come on. There we go. You'll notice that now, over here in my CSS styles, it tells me that that image is sitting at 100 pixels right now, 100 by 100. Depending on what media query this thing happens to roll into, that's going to jump up to 150. And if I drop it all the way down, pretty small, you see that now they're down to 50. So that's great. I can interact with it and see what's going on. A lot of times what this entire responsive design concept is about is being able to create something that works on multiple devices depending on what the viewport is. So you'll see this little NetBeans icon sitting in the Omni bar that we've added. We've actually added the ability to either customize, and we've provided some presets of different types of devices. So if I want to look at something in a tablet landscape, I click on it, it actually resizes it into what is a common tablet landscape size. If I want to drop it all the way down to a smartphone landscape, then it's going to drop it down into here. So it's really nice that I can move around inside the editor and I can see what's going on in the browser, but a lot of times that isn't good enough. You actually need to go from the browser back into the IDE. So now I can click on something in here, and you'll see behind the scenes back here that it's actually jumping over to what it needs to show. And then it highlights it over on the other side. Well, now that we're actually connected, I think that image is actually pretty tiny. So I'm going to click into here, and I'm going to start changing that from 50 pixels to 75. And we'll change the height as well over to 75. And it automatically adjusts. You can see it changing in the browser as I'm changing it here. Now, unlike doing this in your browser tools like in Firebug or Chrome, we're actually doing this in the source code itself. You're not over there tweaking things, trying to figure out what it is, taking all the notes, and then doing cut and paste or whatever over it back into your source code once you figured out what it is you're doing. We're doing it live in the code itself. And as we talked about the media queries, if I click on this height here and I double click on it, it opens up that exact rule in the file. It happens to be in Bootstrap responsive, which I didn't need to know that. That's where it takes me to. If I bring this back out to its larger size to where it sits up at 150 and I double click on it from there, it opens up style.css because that's where I have that one defined. So I've got multiple files all over the place, but the IDE knows which media query I'm in. It knows where that rule is applied to that element at that time, and it takes you to that source code right away. So some pretty nice interaction from that regard. The other nice thing is if I do take this, and I'm going to shrink this back down to smartphone just because it lays out better on the screen while I'm working on it. If I go back to this footer that I put in a minute ago, it highlights it down here. I can double click on it. And got to get back into my right file here. And as some of you are thinking right now, why didn't that take him to the file? Yes, I agree with you. Why didn't it? And we will adjust that later. Welcome to beta. So I'm not going to move that over. So you'll notice right now there's a yellow line underneath this footer. Well, it says that there isn't a style for class footer, and it hasn't been created yet. If I move into my gutter, I see the same thing, but there's a little light bulb there. If I click on it, it allows me to actually create that rule in any of the CSS files that I have currently associated with this HTML file. So I'm just going to stick it into my regular style.css. I can see now that it's actually available over here. If I go over to style, and go down here to the bottom. There it is. So still in the browser, we have over here the footer that's there. I'm going to start kind of adding things into it because it's a footer, right? It's supposed to be gray. It's supposed to be small and unobtrusive and just kind of hidden away in the bottom. So let's just start typing in. We're going to say color. I'm going to make that kind of gray. And it immediately changes to gray. I want to move that down a little bit, so I'm going to type in margin top. You notice now that the code completion is there, but not only does it give me the code completion, it gives me again the documentation. But look up here at the top. If I'm dealing with anything in the CSS that isn't allowed in a browser that I want to work with, I'll see it grayed out up here, or if it isn't available. So this margin top's been around forever. Every single one of these browsers supports it. Our intent is to also start adding in the version number that it was supported in. So if it says it's in Firefox, but it's only Firefox 8 and above or something, then we'll try and get to that point. But right now, at least with that, we have at least that it's available or not. So I'm going to put in a margin top. I'm going to put in a 10 pixels, and that doesn't look like it's quite enough. So I'm going to go back over here and make it 20. That offset's a little bit better. Yeah, that's pretty good there. So I'll go there. And let's make the font size a little bit smaller because we don't want it to. Oh, Fint isn't going to work. And let's just make that down to 10 pixels as well. Okay, so we can do it live. We can see what we're doing. It really makes it a lot easier to kind of mess around with things while you're doing it. So and to kind of see what you're doing a little bit more live. So that's some of the CSS work. Let's go and where the heck did I get everything here now? Let's close that out and go back. Let's save that. And closeout style, closeout responsive. Okay, so some of you may have noticed that this big elephant in the room, it's all in Dutch. And for some of you, that's probably just fine, and you never even realized it because it just thought you were back home. I wanted that to be English, and I'm not really sure what's going on. You know, somebody put this in there, and I'm sure it's supposed to be some sort of language control or whatever, but let's go ahead and take a look at how we figure out what's going on. So if I click on here, you'll notice that it jumped down here to this H1. Well, that has a little bit different icon on it than the others. What that means is that that's actually a dynamically generated element. It's coming out of my JavaScript. So what's really cool about this navigator is that we're not just showing the source code. We're actually showing what is being displayed in the browser directly. This is coming right out of WebKit. This is the DOM that's being displayed. So anything that's generated, we can still style it. I can still go in there and mess with the styling of that generated code, which is really difficult to do if you've got some for loop going on in JavaScript somewhere. But in this case, I want to figure out what the language is doing for that. So I'm going to double click on the div that's right above it. Some really nice guy added a comment in here that said, okay, this content's actually coming from a get welcome function on the window.onload. Okay, great. So I know window.onload is up here. I can hold down the control key and just click on that function that's there, and we'll load up the JavaScript and take you right to the declaration of that code. Now, for those that just couldn't ignore this bright orange bar, it says NetBeans IDE support plugin is debugging this tab. Yeah, like we really wanted you to all know that forever and ever. But unfortunately, that's part of Chrome, and we've filed a bunch of bugs with Google to get that removed, but it has to be there as long as you're debugging. They display this really annoying bright orange bar, and even if you click on the X to close it instead of the cancel, it still cancels it. It disconnects your whole interaction between the browsers. So that has to stay there, unfortunately, but that's where it is. It does give us an idea that we are debugging, and that's exactly what we really are doing. And if we want to see what this lang is getting set or is coming out as, which seems to be a good indication that might be where the problem is, I just click over there and set a breakpoint. I come back over to the browser, give it a refresh, and you notice it pauses, and it actually comes up green right over here. It's a typical, at this point, it's really just a typical debugger. I'm going to step into, which is going to drop down to my get lang. I'm going to step over that a couple of times, and I'm going to say, okay, what's going on here? I mean, it's navigator.userAgent, and it's trying to match something inside of there. I look at the string, and there's absolutely nothing in there dealing with the language. I mean, nothing. So obviously, that's a problem. So for the sake of demo, we will figure out, or we're gonna go a little bit further into if user agent doesn't contain what we want, then maybe let's see what else is available on Navigator. Now I can come down to my variables and go through all my variables and see what's going on there if I want to, or I can just hover over Navigator and expand directly in my tooltips, my object, and take a look at what's going on. Again, here's my user agent. I can see exactly what's in there. I can hover over it. Nothing with language, but lo and behold, there actually is something called language. Look at that. And it's got en.us on it. So maybe that's what I want to deal with. I could go rewrite my code and rerun this thing, but like I say, for demo purposes, we're just going to get rid of that, and we're going to use a great little thing in NetBeans called code templates. Wow, look at that. So that just puts in a new function that I already preset that up. It now uses the language. It also takes into account that some browsers use user language instead of regular language. And from that point, I save. And because I have refresh on save, it just automatically reloads it. Again, I can step in, step over a couple of times, and now take a look at what lang is set at. It's now enus, which is what I want. So let's turn off that and run it through, and lo and behold, we're back in English, like we want to. So pretty simple in dealing with the debugger. It's really just like a debugger you'd use anywhere else, but now we can actually mess around with the data and see what's going on in those areas. So A couple other things that are pretty cool about the editor and the JavaScript editor. I'm going to go out of this page and bring up kind of a little playground page that I have. I'm going to run the individual page instead of the project. And at this point, let's load that up a little bit. I've got a few other, just like I say, it's just a playground. So I wrote a whole bunch of crazy things in here, from a couple of jQuery animations to just do some div switching. I got a drag and drop that I can drag the little kitten up to see the bunny. Oh. So, yeah, and you've got a few other little things in here. I added this one in, and someone freaked and said, "You're going to do this live?" Yeah. So this is actually a RESTful call into Twitter, and it's going to give me whatever the most recent tweet is that has the word Java 1 in it. So let's hope it's not nasty. And it's not. Okay, good. But just, really quick, easy thing to do. This is actually coming off of a RESTful service that I have running on the machine. And it's just simply hitting a company and then pulling up the details for it. So let's take a look at some of this RESTful service and how we're messing with it and what we're doing behind the scenes. From my About page, I'm just running everything in about.js. And again, this is just the declaration that calls it in. I'm just going to control and click. It's going to open it up. I'm going to expand this up. And we'll take a look at what's going on. So this is the RESTful call. There's a bunch of different ways of dealing with REST data. And I'm sure if any of you have been hitting around at the different HTML5 and the RESTful service sessions, there are as many different ways to pull data as that you can imagine. As long as you're getting back a REST, like a JSON object or something like that, then we can style it and deal with it. I'm not going to try and show you today how to, do the best REST call or how to do security over REST and things like that. Really what EASEL is about is the styling of the data once you get it. But there are some cool things that you can do from these different ideas and these different concepts. I use jQuery a lot in this, and you can see that by the $ that's here. In some cases, people don't quite, a $ and the word jQuery are synonymous in the jQuery world. Well, there's one of the things in the editor that makes it a little bit easier. Say I didn't really want to leave all those $signs. So I can hold down the control key again and press R, and it's going to give me in-place rename. So now I can just say jQuery instead of that, hit enter, and every single $ just changed to jQuery. All right. And if it is transactional, so if I hit Control Z, it's not. It'll back everything out together as well. It's nice. It actually works really well when we come down here, say, to the JSON call that I was making out of Twitter. If instead of having data, I wanted to call it, to be a little more descriptive. Again, the Control R, I can change this to tweet data. And maybe that's a little more realistic example of renaming things within a function. It's scope-based, so it kind of knows. It'll stay on this page for right now. It doesn't do full-blown refactoring across your entire application yet. It just stays within the one page. So it's something we added into the editor that I found it nice when I'm putting together some of these demos and so forth. It works really well. Obviously, it doesn't do anything for the code itself. It still looks and runs exactly the same. So one of the things that I was looking at and when I was putting all this together, I had to create this little tweet piece. And when I did that, anybody knows Franz? He's still seeking some Java 1 cool stuff, so make sure you know where he's at. I went and stole this little pop-up as a login from some other site. I saw it on a site. I went and just grabbed their CSS and said, okay, that looks really cool. And then I wanted to turn it into this tweet and add things and so forth, because I just wanted the base folder and the little close button and so forth. So what I did was I went out and I just looked at Twitter API and I figured out, okay, here's a basic call for the search, and I'm going to search off the key name of Java 1. But how am I going to know what to get back? I mean, for those of you who have dealt with SOAP or WSDLs and waddles and all this other stuff, we had some form of standardization that you knew what you were going to get back. Well, it doesn't work that way in the world of REST. You're just going to get a chunk of something, and you got to go figure out what to do with it. So by dropping in a breakpoint right here and then coming over and running this, I can actually stop and look now at that object and open it up, expand it. Sometimes this may be better to do down in the variable window because you can keep it up a little bit longer. But I know that I'm getting my results back. The search returns 15 results, and I only want the first one. So I know I'm going to have to go into an object or a result 0, so I know that already. And then now I can actually see the real data that's being returned out of that information. And so I can start to say, okay, well, I know I want to put the guy's image up, so I'm going to come down here and, okay, here's a profile image URL. So that's the string that I have to get back because I can see that's his URL. I had no idea. I actually learned when I was doing it that there was a from user and a from username. Now, which one's which? Because I wanted to be able to show the ampersand or the at and then the username or whatever. And well, by looking in here, I can tell that from username is the full name, and from user is actually the shortened version. So now, without ever going out of my debugger, I can start writing code in here, which I've already done, but I can say, okay, I want to set the text to the username. I want to set little parentheses with an @ sign, and then from there, that's the user, and I want to set the image up here. And all of that is just populating this table that I created at the bottom. It's really using field sets and labels, which are some HTML5 stuff. But those just have their IDs on them. And I just say, here's my tweet user and or username, and there's my tweet user and the tweet text and so forth. So I'm just filling in those properties using jQuery. But because of that debugger, I was able to set all that stuff up with live data instead of just trying to guess on what was going on. So I'll turn that off. We'll just run it, and we'll see that if I come back over here. Hey, thanks, John. There we go. It helps to have coworkers out in the crowd somewhere. Thanks, buddy. Crack me up. God. Okay. So there are obviously there's a lot of different ways that we can pull this data in. There's a lot of different things we can do. One of the things also, let's go in. Where am I at here? Let's add one other thing using. So I said that within the JavaScript editor now we have jQuery and we have this intelligent ability. So if I type in $ and hit control space, it's just going to give me some parens. But if I do control space again, it knows that I've started a jQuery call. And it's going to give me a list. It should. Come on. Oh, you demo gods finally died. Imagine, if you will. I don't know why it's not doing that. Let's try it with jQuery itself. Nope, it's not going to do it for us. Okay, so obviously that intern sucked, so he didn't help us out much when we sacrificed him earlier today. What would have happened is, as I go into and do my code completion, it would pop up and it will give me a list of all of the available IDs coming out of the different divs, and so that's what it's supposed to look like on the first try. And I can go in and set, so I'm going to choose, say, the animation ID, and I can put dot and D and the control space, and it says, okay, well, these are all jQuery. Well, okay, so now we're into jQuery. Thank you. And it actually gives me, I'm going to try and do a double click on this particular thing, and it gives me all of the jQuery, again, the context, the different documentation and so forth that we can mess around with. It gives us the version that this came from and so forth. So I'm just going to add a double click in there, and I'll just write up a quick function. Oops, wrong one. Where's my keyboard? There, okay. And we'll throw in just a really quick alert. Okay, so really just quick stuff, adding in a double click onto this little purple thing that we have out here, the little animation. So again, I save, it refreshes on the page. Now my little animation that used to do just regular animation, now if I double click on it, it brings up and says, hello, Java 1. So it can help you a little bit with the jQuery, especially if the code completion works. But it allows you to kind of work with not only JavaScript, but with the jQuery as well, and you can work a little bit faster in those areas. One other thing, so these, again, as I was saying, you can get the data in a bunch of different ways, and this obviously is just some really basic one-type calls out of Twitter or whatever. One of the things that we've added in EASEL as well is this ability within a new file, you can create what we call a RESTful JavaScript client. Now this will work off of a REST service that you have the source code to. So in this particular case, in the IDE, I actually have a project called REST Demo. So I have the sources to this REST service. And what this little wizard will do for us is, come back up, there we go. It will ask me where I want to add my JavaScript file to, and I'm going to browse over to that and say that I want to put it in with all the other JavaScript files. And then it's going to ask me for my REST project, and I can just say, well, okay, I have this REST project, and it will look inside of that REST project and find the services that are being provided, which in this case is my manufacturers. And I have a choice of either going with no UI or going with a table sorter UI, which is just this really basic table that sorts and so forth. And we're going to generate an MVC, backbone-based MVC infrastructure for you based off of your RESTful project. So I will click Next. It wants to know where to put my HTML because I'm asking it to generate the UI, so I'll just put that in the normal place. And we'll let that run through. And it'll go out, it generates the model, it generates the view because I asked it to, it generates some templates, and it opens up my JavaScript file because this is really where I'm going to be working on it. So here's all my, my model views or my model environment and where it's being extended. You come on down in here a little further and it talks about extending view. And if I go over to my project itself, I'll see now that it added this new.html. And down deep in here, it started adding in a bunch of templates. And these are just the templates that will get placed in. Here's my address and so forth. So if I run this, another thing that's built in. So one of the things that's built into this is this thing called a browser log, which is just that. It's that air browse, that console that you use or you're used to seeing if you're in browser tools. So in this particular case, this template that was built, and again, welcome to beta, this wizard that was generated actually was pulling some CSS off of some guy's GitHub repository. Well, it turns out, when I went and looked at it, that a couple days ago, he renamed all of his CSS files in his repository. So our wizard is broken. So, I mean, it tells us, though, that the data worked. It all shows up, and it just looks like heck. So let's fix it. I mean, we know where the error is. We know what's going on. I did find this about an hour and a half ago when I was just kind of running through things. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And I have the real line now. And I'll just grab that really quick. And we will shoot back over to our, we're in our HTML. So up here at the top, we can see that, where's the, there it is, blue. So we're just going to change that out really quick. Save it, run it. And it still looks like heck until we go out large. Yeah. Still looks like it. What the heck? Yeah, I'm going to look at my browser log, see what's going on. Did I not save properly? What did I do? Oh well. Hey, we know it's broken. I'll figure it out later. But as I can show you here, at least, that even though it's not styled right, and I could take the time to go style it, it now has basically a CRUD app, and if I click on any of these, it does fill in all the data here, and I can delete that. I can actually create new. So what that wizard does is, if you have the source code, at least it sets up an MVC framework. Again, it's based off of Backbone for now. We've had questions about Angular and those types of other libraries out there. There's lots of different areas we can do with that. But this is where we are for right now. So that's about as far as I was going to go on actually demoing this stuff, because I'm imagining that there are a lot of questions about what we've done in here. And I definitely wanted to save as much time as I could for some questions. So if you want to, I'll repeat the questions so that everybody can hear them, but I'll do my best to hear them as you yell them out at me. Why don't we show of hands? Give me a question out there. Yeah? Right. So he noticed at the beginning that I started a new HTML5 project, and he's asking if you have to be in that project in order for these features to be available. The answer is yes. Currently, that's where we're at. In all honesty, as I said at the very beginning, we're still this is something that's maturing. There's a lot of evolution going on where you want to be, and we felt we needed to start somewhere. So that's where we started. Obviously, CSS styling is great in a JSF file, a PHP file, or wherever. There's a lot of different capabilities that we want to see that go into. And while that will not show up in version 1, which we hope to release here in the next week or so, that definitely is something we're looking down the road to try and implement, is make this available. I mean, like I say, NetBeans, within the 3 IDEs of Oracle's world, NetBeans is what we experiment and try. I mean, it's stable and you can use it and everything else, but new features and new concepts and new ideas, this is where we get to put them. And so that's where we're starting with. And hopefully, yeah, we'll get all of this available into other areas that will make more sense, or make as much sense, if not more. Yeah. Another question? Really? Oh, I shocked you all. Yes? That's a really good question. So the breakpoints in the JavaScript, they pause the browser. So does the browser ever time out? Do you ever hit the timeout in the browser?
No. Why should it?
He wrote it.
Not really. Like, it can time out in a situation, for example, when you unit testing, and some unit test engine have that sort of fallback, like if your unit test should deadlock, so after a certain time it would time out. So in that case, you need to sort of prevent it or increase the timeout on the JUnit testing engine. But no, there's no reason. The browser just sits there and waits as long as, forever.
Yeah, I've never had it time out while I was writing all this stuff, and I've played around with it quite a bit. So it shouldn't.
It's the same case like with browser tools, really. Browser tools would never time out either. It's just different UI for the browser tools.
Yeah. Question in the back. Oh yeah. If you broke it, it would time out like a normal browser would. Yeah. Yeah, you got the response, or you didn't. Yeah. After you kick it out. But yeah. You got to remember that the debugging that we've implemented is actually using remote WebKit debugging. I mean, it's actually getting the information right from Chrome. I mean, they're interconnected. We've wrapped around a nice UI on top of what they're giving us. So we're actually pausing them and getting the data from them. There was another question right in here. Yeah. So David actually talked a little bit about unit testing this morning in his talk, but
yeah, we have integration with JS Test Driver, which is the like an engine to run your unit tests, JavaScript unit tests, and then it's not very different from Java. You just write your JavaScript unit tests, and the IDE is able to run them for you. How JS Test Driver works is that it's a server which using existing browsers as slaves and delegates the JavaScript code to the browsers. Browsers run the JavaScript, send the response back, and the IDE presents it, because usually if you have your JavaScript application, you would want to be able to run it in all your browsers, in different browsers. And the same thing works that just this driver server can run on this box, but if that one would be like a Windows station, then we can have slaves on different operating systems.
Okay. Any other? Yeah, another question over here. I'm going to go over there real quick. Yeah.
Once we develop this HTML5 in NetBeans ID, this can be deployed in other applications server like WebSphere or WebLogic or something like that?
Well, it's all, yeah, I mean, as much as anybody could deploy HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript into anything. Yeah, I mean, this is just code sitting on the file system. So it's not packaged into a WAR or anything like that. You'd have to do all that yourself. I mean, this is truly client HTML coding. It's not going to, there isn't any deploy it to, Glassfish or WebLogic or something like that, no. But you could. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, once you have this HTML project and stuff like that, can you deploy it out to any app server, WebLogic, JBoss, any of the ones that are out there, Glassfish. Make sure I get all of ours listed in there as well. So yeah, I mean you can, but it's client-side code, so there's nothing that stops you today from running that stuff in a WAR or something. Yeah. Another testing question. All right.
What mileage would you get from non-HTML5 browsers, and what advanced HTML5 things like WebSocket are
Okay. Yeah, so the question is, how much mileage do you get out of like the non-integrated browsers like Firefox or IE or whatever? Oh, non-HTML5 supported. So it's interesting because there's very little. The only thing that's HTML5 in this entire demo is drag and drop, and that's actually using the on-drag and on-drop methods of HTML5. Because and so in that regard, all of this, other than that drag and drop, runs on any browser. It's the CSS that starts to mess you up, and that's why I showed that in the little help pop-up, that you can see which browsers support what. And it's still iffy. I mean, there's I didn't have it running in here, but if you if you take a look at where's my run file? Hang on. Yeah, so if you take a look at this About page really quick, this part here, so there's a shadow around the outside of that. So that's called a box shadow. And actually even the border radiuses. It was really fascinating because I started writing this app a couple of weeks ago, and my Chrome browser updated in the middle, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago, but my Chrome browser updated in the middle of when I started to when I ended. Well, when I started this, box shadow didn't work in Chrome. I had to put -webkit -box-shadow in order to make it work here. Well, all of a sudden the other day I forgot to put WebKit and the dang thing worked. And it's because the browser updated and now they support it. So it is tricky in certain areas, and you've got to, I mean, that's part of being a designer or part of working in this world as things are emerging, and there isn't a set standard yet, that things will adjust. We're trying to keep those tooltips and those help panels updated as much as possible, but this is Wild Wild West, and you're just shooting from the hip in a lot of cases. Yeah. So that's another feature that we're hoping to see in V2. All of our usability studies and focus groups are asking for that exact same thing. The question was, can this, or is this thing, is there a way to test it to see if it's compatible with other browsers and so forth? And no, not today. We would love to be able to build right into the editor as you start to code so it would come up with a tool, an error or something, or a warning saying, in your project properties, you set that this is my target is IE, or my target is, Chrome or something. And if it doesn't fall within your target, it errors out on some sort of an analyzer, or an analysis type, so audit tools. But no, that's not in there today. You would still have to do that testing on your own. There are tools out there that do that testing, but.
Just a kind of a follow-up question to that same thing. But when you're doing the code completion, there is an icon at the top right-hand corner, so one of the browser.
Correct.
So what is it sounds to me like it shows there's some level of compatibility.
It does. So he's talking about that when I was doing code completion, there were little browser icons at the top. That's what I mentioned there that was in the CSS portion of it. And yes, that's what we're trying to keep as up to date as possible, is that when you're typing something in CSS, because that's the most fragile area right now, you will see if it's grayed out, that what you're typing, if your browser of choice is grayed out, find something different, because it's not going to work. Yeah, I mean, those are pretty much the majority. I mean, you've got Firefox, Chrome, Safari, Opera.
Probably IE.
Oh, and yeah, IE. Oh, God, don't let us all forget IE. Sorry. Yeah, so I mean, those are pretty much the industry standards. I mean, if you go anywhere else, I mean, my personal one, I'm using a couple of social browsers, but they're all based off of Chrome. You know, so most of them are derivatives of that somewhere in there. Now, if you're using, you said a Netscape browser, I feel for you if you're still using a Netscape browser. But yeah, we won't add those in. We're going to stay with just those up there, and you'll have to know where your compatibilities are in those areas. Yeah. Any questions back in the back before these guys? Yeah, back there. I'll come back to you. Yes.
So can you kind of answer for existing projects that are PHP, JSP, or you kind of have kind of one, right? This is strictly for starting from scratch, HTML.
Yeah. So the question is for existing projects, PHP, JSP. I didn't hear anybody say ASP or ASP.NET, sorry. But yeah, any of those, yeah, you're kind of out of luck for right now. But you could still, I mean, by the way, so if somebody, how many of us, by show of hands, how many are consultants out here? Actually do consultant work. So quite a few of you, right? And you walk into that job and someone goes, ooh, I need HTML5. I don't know what it is, but I need it. So, you've got this Java knowledge, you've got the IDE, you've got all this stuff that you want to work with, but now you've got to put it into HTML5. Well, okay, if they give you some templates or something, you notice that below that, you could actually start a new HTML5 project from source. And you could stick your CSS and your JavaScript in there and just load, and you point to that directory and we'll put it all together for you in a project, and you could work with it. And we're not doing anything magic. I mean, we're not taking files and separating them and doing a bunch of weird templates. It's straight JavaScript and CSS. So when you're done, take your CSS and move it back into your PHP project or wherever you need it to be, and away you go. I mean, we really do want to make this stuff go and work in other projects. We're not, ignorant or pie in the sky type of thing, is saying, hey, you're all Java programmers, come to the world of JavaScript and client. No, we just know that this is where we need it to start, and eventually we'll get it all back to where it gets used the most. And where it gets used the most still hasn't been defined yet. There's still a lot of people that are really, really happy to see this stuff in the client side the way it is. So we're right tool, right job, right? Just grab another tool and put it in the belt. Question up here. Is it tied to the NetBeans IDE? Yes.
So we cannot do that in RAD or
in what?
RAD, rational application development.
No, you can't use it in RAD or anything like that. No, it is NetBeans. Believe me, we're actually looking. So again, I mentioned all the IDEs that Oracle supports, right? From Eclipse with OP to JDeveloper to NetBeans. I happen to be the product manager for EASEL, but I'm also the product manager for the core of JDeveloper. So the editor, the compiler, and all the menuing systems of JDeveloper are mine as well. This will go to JDeveloper. And from JDeveloper, it will show up probably in OP. I don't know for a fact, but that may very well where it goes. It definitely will go to JDeveloper. We're already working on that. But whether or not it shows up in OP over in Eclipse, I don't know. But we definitely are sharing a lot of things between our IDEs, and this is one that we're working very heavily with. So, yeah, question?
In another session, they said that if you want to use Java-FX in a project like this, you need a plugin, and you have to be targeting browsers to support those plugins. Have you ever tried using Java-FX within this?
Wow. Yeah, so the question is, in another talk she heard that in order to use Java-FX into one of these, you'd have to have some sort of a plugin and work from there. I don't know the answer to that, to be perfectly honest with you. I imagine that the answer that was given is simply with any web-based HTML type of, you can put a Java-FX, everybody will shudder when I say this, but an applet into a web page, and it will run your Java-FX. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not familiar enough with JavaFX to be honest with you. I don't know. But if there's a way to do that, we'll be figuring it out pretty quick. I know, within the IDE. I didn't show it. Within the IDE, and I got like 5 minutes, so we'll go real quick. I can change my target to this embedded WebKit here, and if I run it, So what we did was, for those that don't have multiple monitors and the ability to run, side by side. Whoops, what did I do? There it goes. Come on, stop that. This is a JavaFX enabled. This is a web view. So this is WebKit running in an internal browser, and everything that I showed you over here, you can do in this as well. So all of the, click on something and it highlights in the file and so forth. So all of that interactivity that we showed before, the ability to choose a tablet size or a smartphone, it'll resize into what we want it to look like and so forth. And it uses the RESTful interfaces and all that kind of stuff. So that's all available internally as well. That happens to be using JavaFX. That's using JavaFX's web view. So if you ever look at their browser component that you'll see in the FX samples, that's what we put in here into the IDE. Now, that doesn't answer your question about putting JavaFX into a web page, which I don't know the answer to. I'm sorry. Yeah. Any other questions? I got one more there.
Yeah, you showed a JavaScript library manager.
Yes.
No, unfortunately not. Yeah, we really rely on whatever is available in public CDNs, and I think that information, as far as I know, is not there in CDN, in Google CDN or CDN.js. So
it makes a lot of sense.
It would be nice. It makes lots of sense to me because lots of libraries has lots of dependencies. But in this era, we just rely on what other people are doing. We just trying to make it available in ID, but this information is not in CDN, so we don't. Really nice. Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to throw up a couple more. So legal, read quickly. Thank you. And done. Okay, so how do you learn more? Well, other presentations. Again, the idea is get the data over to this so that you can style it and mess with it and so forth. So learn about RESTful, learn about WebSockets, learn about or server-sent events, those types of things so that you can get that data out to your front ends, and then from your client side, you can mess around and see what you can do with it on the styling side and make it all pretty. NetBeans 7.3 beta, this is where this will exist. You can actually download it today if you go and get the dev builds. Okay, it's there. And then on the netbeans.org site, we have a mailing list and also the forum. There's a forum called Web Client Users, and we will be actively answering and interacting with whomever posts up questions. When I checked this morning, there was one spam question, nothing else. So hopefully others will put in more questions for us. So thank you very much for attending. I really appreciate you coming out, and I hope you find this interesting.